Welcome back to the Azure podcast. Today is the 23rd of March of 2022, and we are recording episode 417 with the topic App Service Diagnostics. On Teams with me today, we have Sujit, Evan, Kale, myself, Cynthia, and our very special guest, Jung Choi. And before we get to our special guest, as usual, we have a couple updates we'd want to share. And I know, Kale, you put a couple of them in. You want to start?
Yeah, sure. So I got four of them here today. The first one is around port forwarding management with the Azure Load Balancer. So there's been some enhancements there today around managing port forwarding for virtual machine scale sets or group of machines in your backend pool. And so the blog kind of goes through why you would do this, what port forwarding is about. So if you're not familiar with that concept, kind of walks through those scenarios and why this is important. And it's really around an easier way to manage things whenever you have to use inbound NAT rules and things like that for your load balance machines. Second one is an event call out. So there's this modernize and migrate with hybrid cloud flexibility event, which is an awesome title. But no, this is happening on April 13th. All kidding aside, it's a pretty cool event, and they kind of talk through some of the infrastructure modernization and migration stuff, hybrid cloud. There's a bunch of demos and workshops that are going on there, and you can even win stuff like Surface headphones, earbuds, and things like that. So it's a digital event. I think it's 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Pacific time, so it's only a few hours on April 13th. So check it out. The other two are around GPU type stuff. So one is around these, I guess we call them NVADs, NVADS A10s in Azure, which are these new SKUs, which are the NVIDIA A10 Tensor Core GPUs. Kind of technical, but they're bigger. So they do more compute.
Technical? Is that the technical description, Caleb?
Yeah, kind of technical, but they're just more powerful. I'm not belittling that in any way. I mean, these are highly complex, things for doing AI predominantly, but also like graphics programming and things like that. So continuing our work on the N series that started years back. These are in preview right now. And then the last one is around ACC, Azure Confidential Compute, that we've talked about a few times on the podcast. We now have this new capability to do confidential computing with NVIDIA GPUs, which is super cool. So when you think about, having an architecture where you have a CPU and a GPU, there's a bus between them. This is a way for the data to be encrypted. So as it's moving from CPU to GPU over the PCIe bus, it could also be encrypted, which is super cool for highly confidential, AI type workloads and different things that people are running on there. This is a private preview sign up. So we'll post the notes in the blog, but you can basically sign up for this, but it's not something that's widespread yet. But it's kind of like an early access preview. And then we talk about some of the scenarios where confidential compute's being used. I think Bosch and RBC, the Royal Bank of Canada, are being called out in this blog post around workloads that they're running in there using this technology. So super cool stuff.
Yeah, nice. There's been a lot of announcements around the confidential computing recently as it sort of becomes integrated into the general use in the platform. Right? I think I saw some stuff with site recovery and Azure backup and stuff around that as well. I'll jump in with the Azure Container Registry announcement. So there's now a public preview for Azure Container Registry on Azure Stack Hub. Just for everybody's recollection, this is the basically run Azure on hardware in your data center. It's not quite the same implementation. There's a ton of commonality, though. The goal is to make those as close as possible. But again, it gives you bringing some capabilities from the public cloud into the hybrid on-premises world.
Yeah, and I had a couple of updates. One is regarding Azure Time Series, which is a service that we've had for a while, but is now being deprecated or being phased away in favor of Azure Data Explorer. And I actually came to know this recently when a partner reached out to me with a question about time series, and then I came to find out later that we're recommending to them not to take any more action on that time series service and to in fact move to Data Explorer. So that's something we still have time for that. It's I think December 2025. But what doesn't have a whole lot of time is app service. If you use .NET in app service and you're still using .NET Core 3.1, that is coming up in December of this year. That's when that's going to go out of support, and you want to start moving to .NET 6. Which reminds me, I need to check the Azure podcast website to make sure that we also do that in time. That's it for me.
And then kind of on the retirement train, Azure Q&A Maker will be retired on March 31st of 2025. And the recommendation is that you would migrate into Azure Cognitive Service for Language using custom questions. So custom questions has all the capabilities that's within Q&A Maker and some more. And I think it might be time for us to bring someone on to talk about the cognitive service space, because I feel it feels like there's been a lot of changes in that aspect. And I think that is the round of updates we had. I'm now going to turn it over to Yoon. Can you introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us what you do at Microsoft?
Thanks for having me. Hi, everyone. My name is Jung Choi. I'm a program manager at Microsoft, and I work on the self-serve diagnostics experience that you can easily find in the Azure Portal. And today I'm here to talk about the Azure App Service Diagnostics experience, which is also known as App Service Diagnostics.
So just as a starting point, what are some of the capabilities that App Service Diagnostics bring to our developers?
Yeah, so App Service Diagnostics, I think you can divide them into two buckets. One consists of various different checks that you can run without doing any configuration. And it'll immediately tell you what are some of the critical issues that we discovered on your resource, and provide you with the next steps on how to address those issues. And there's also another bucket of tools that you can use to investigate further into different set of issues. So I'll be going into more details later, but these tools are more investigation focused. So a lot of the times you will need to do some minimal configurations to run these tools, but once you run them, you can collect you can collect additional data to look further into the problem and debug.
So when you say there's no configuration required, is it just something that I enable? Or how do I ensure I get these information?
Oh, yeah, good questions. So a lot of the checks that we'll be running for those features that don't require you to have any configuration are from our platform logs. So we really have that information in our hand, and we have, very like those people who are subject matter experts in these areas are authoring these checks, and they know about all of the known issues. So they're doing validations against those known issues to see if there are any critical issues that we should surface to you for using App Service.
So is this something like if I wrote a web application and I'm running it on Azure in an app service, maybe I use something like App Insights right now to get deep telemetry and maybe even diagnostics like errors. Do I use this in conjunction with that, or how should I think about that?
Yeah, so you can actually use application insights in conjunction for app service windows. So if you go to app service diagnostics, there will be, and once you drill down into the troubleshooting category, availability and performance, there will be a little banner indicating that you can set up your connection to application insights. And once you enable that, you will be able to see some of the application insights information flowing in. So you can see all the diagnostics that we have in App Service Diagnostics in conjunction with the information from application insights. The types of information that will be powered by application insights would be the exception codes and whatnot, and further details on those exceptions.
So recently we had a PM that talked to us about Azure Service Connector, which is kind of, it seems to be a related service that can diagnose connectivity issues between, let's say, your app service and a database or storage account and things like that. So, but what you're talking about is focused primarily around the compute and the application itself. Is that where the focus area is?
Yes, but good thing that you actually brought this up, because we have a fairly new tool that kind of fits into the second bucket of tools that I mentioned, named Network Troubleshooter, which does exactly that. So it would actually check for any connection failures to a resource such as like a SQL, Redis, or an on-prem in your like own virtual network. And then it also has basically an option to run checks on the configurations of your VNet integration. So it'll bubble up any red flags that it discovers and let you know if you need to take action.
So you mentioned, coming subject matter experts coming up with, these insights, everything. Is this leveraging the same tooling that the support ecosystem uses, when they're looking for and debugging diagnostics? And I'm guessing, because I know the name of the internal tool, so I'm guessing they're closely related, which is great because there's a lot of good stuff there. But are we leveraging that full pipeline, or is this something independent?
Yeah, so we are actually leveraging the full pipeline. So these exact set of checks that you will see in the portal is what support engineers would see when they're working on your cases. Obviously, there will be some information that are internal only, and support engineers might be able to see a little bit more in terms of the information, but you will see a fair number of checks that actually have the same amount of information in both the support ecosystem as well as in the portal.
Right. So if I understand you right, we may not be able to push 100% of those forward to, say, customer facing, but it's absolutely the same thinking, the same tooling, the same mindset, and there's probably a lot of commonality between those two places.
Yeah.
So it's not that we're hiding stuff. There's just not. We just can't push everything out to customers.
Right. And then basically we are, as I've mentioned, some of the subject matter experts who have authored these checks are actually CSS engineers who see customer pain points every day. So you'll notice that a lot of these known issues, and those ones are very, very much what we observe as a common trend in terms of customers' experience. So you'll end up finding a good set of checks to run against your apps.
Sense.
Can you walk us through a flow of, for instance, my application is down, how can I leverage App Service Diagnostic to find out what I should fix?
Yeah, definitely. So first thing you would do, given that you have an app service instance hosted on Azure, you would go to the overview blade for your app service resource. And then once you land there, you'll see a menu item in the left that says diagnose and solve problems. And also there's a really obvious big tile in the main page that says diagnose and solve problems. So you can click on that one too. So it's hard to miss. But once you click there, you'll be taken to the App Service Diagnostics landing page, where you see immediately there are a few checks that are run, which I'm hoping to get into more details later on, so I'll skip this for now. But you'll immediately see that a few checks have been run on your app, but also below there are several troubleshooting categories for you to check out, ranging from availability and performance, configuration and management, SSL and domains, risk assessments, navigator, and then diagnostic tools. And Cynthia, the example that you gave was what happens if you're having issues with downtimes on your app. So since downtimes are very much related to availability and performance of your application, among the troubleshooting categories, I would choose availability and performance. And once you land there, there will be some checks run on your behalf again. related to availability and performance issues. So you can either click on any of the reds that you see among those checks, like if you have a large percentage of failed requests, there will be a huge like red flag saying that you need to check this out. Or if you have a spike in CPU usage, it'll also like point that out. But you can either click through these obvious like indicators of problems, or you can also click on web app down in the left navigation, which will take you to a set of checks that consist of any factors that could cause your web app to go down. So these multiple checks are run to see if any of these get a hit on whether your web app is experiencing downtime. So once you land there, you'll see like checks consisting of, has your web app restarted recently? Have you had high CPU? Are you running out of memory? Was there an application crash? Or was there any HTTP server errors? And I especially like this one because it'll actually give you very detailed information on what these HTTP errors are consisting of. So let's just take for an example, if you're getting a 503, which is a server unavailable error, and it'll show you the number of hits we were getting on that request. So requests that were failing with this status code, and then also the failing module, which in this case would be a rewrite module, and then it'll tell you the next steps on how to fix this problem. And sometimes it'll even point you to some investigative tools, which we call diagnostic tools in the app service experience, so you can further drill down into the issue and find the root cause.
Given the description, is this something people usually come to when there is a problem? Or can this also be like a proactive monitoring tool before it becomes a problem?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've definitely seen people use this as just a basic sanity check. So they would just come to web app down every day and just run it just to see if there's any issue that gets bubbled up. But also there's another set of tools that are more proactive in nature. I think it's a good segue to get to those tools actually. So like I said in the beginning, like there are two different buckets, and one of it being the investigative tools, which we call diagnostic tools. And if you go there, there are, I believe, 3 tools mapping to what we call proactive tools. And what these tools do at a high level, you can kind of set conditions when you want a mitigative actions to be triggered. So let's take one for an example. Like if you know that when your app is having, I don't know, like 10 counts of 500 errors, you immediately want to recycle the process and restart the app to get it out of a bad state. You can actually define these conditions in this tool called Autoheal, and then configure the action that you want to take. If you just simply want to recycle the process, that's good. But if you also want to investigate further, you can recycle the process and at the same time log this event. So you can actually like collect memory dumps, CLI profiler, and such. And then basically once you have all of these conditions defined, you can just save the setting. And then basically the setting will be saved to your app setting, and you will be able to just monitor your app for these defined conditions, and whenever those conditions are met, the mitigative action will take place.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. If it could like do auto heal type stuff, how open is that, right? You mentioned like recycling a process, which is pretty basic, but like, should I think about this as like, let's say CPUs like pegging on my web servers, I should have more web servers, right? Does it do things like that? Like I can actually orchestrate like scaling up more servers, or is it solely focused on this process on this machine? Like,
oh yeah, so these set of tools I mentioned are more or so focused on the mitigative actions. So just really trying to get your app out of a bad state. But there are set of actually checks that you can run within within App Service Diagnostics. You can find them under the troubleshooting category risk assessment. And basically what it's doing is there are various different configurations that you can do to make sure your app is resilient to downtimes. And just to list a few, like those could be you want to distribute your workload across multiple instances to remove a single point of failure. Or another example I can think of is like having always on enabled on your resource, so you're not experiencing any cold starts, and the list goes on and on. But basically, all of these best practices have been made into checks that can be easily found on App Service Diagnostics. And once you run them, it'll just immediately tell you whether you have it configured, how you can, if you don't have it configured, how you can configure it. And also it even like has checks on, like, let's say you have an Autoheal rule that I just talked about configured, but it's not really optimal. Like as in you had it, your like request count is way too low that your app will like always be recycling. Like that's not what you want. Like those conditions will be also called out in this in the risk assessments. So if you have like questions around, you know, like whether I should scale up or scale out, like those questions, and, you know, how to keep my app to be more resilient to downtimes, risk assessment is a great resource to go to.
And while you were talking just now, you and I went on to our Azure podcast website, which is on app services, and tried this. I went to the Ask Genie tool, which is pretty nice, and asked, is the website working? And it immediately ran a few checks, and it said, oh, you got one HTTP 500 error you need to look into, which I didn't know. So it does work. Very nice.
I thought you were going to say it. Our site's got all these problems, Sajid.
Well, the one problem from the last 1 month, so not bad.
Also, good thing you brought up the Ask Genie experience, and I think you were like the model example of how to use the Ask Genie feature. Basically, like I talked about like all these different paths that you can take within App Service Diagnostics. But let's say, for example, you're like completely new to this experience and you have no clue where to go to. There will be a button in the landing page and also everywhere within Diagnostics called Ask Genie, kind of fixed at the top middle part of the page. And if you click on it, it'll open up a chatbot experience where you can type in the problem that you're experiencing in your own words. So I can say something like my web app is down, and then it will pull up any checks that we have that are relevant to the problem statement that I shared, along with some documentations from web we deem are very important for troubleshooting this type of issue. So yeah, that was great actually that you were able to use Ask Genie to figure out the problem.
And I think that I'm fairly sure I know the answer to this because you're talking about app services, and I'm pretty sure that last time I checked, our site is running within a web app, right? A multi-tenant environment versus the single tenant environment. I can use this on sort of that full range of web apps deployments, right? I can do it on app service environment. I can do it on V2, V3. I can do it on multi-tenant. It doesn't really matter what my platform. I can use Genie and App Services Diagnostics with it, right?
Yeah. So we don't yet have support for Ask Genie for app service environments, but we do have support for it in Windows, Web App Windows and Web App Linux, I believe.
Okay.
But we are working on expanding support to all the resources that have a similar experience like App Service Diagnostics.
Okay, so just to make sure, so everybody has the App Services Diagnostics, the Genie piece, sort of the for those of us that don't know what we're doing piece, like that part, it's not quite everywhere yet, but it's coming. You're working on it. Mm-hmm. Okay, great.
So you talked about Autoheal earlier. Once I get through one of those events, is there a way that I can capture that lesson or their data that's collected associated with that incident that I can kind of use after I mitigate the issue to ensure that, like, maybe I go through my architecture and re-architect certain components?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you configure actions, when you're first setting up your Autoheal rule and you configure actions, and if you select collecting artifacts such as memory dump, it will ask you where you would like to collect your memory dump, and you can specify the storage account for which you will be collecting these logs in. So after an Autoheal event happened and the tool has collected a memory dump, let's just take that as an example. If you go to the Autoheal tool, you'll see this button underneath that says View All Sessions, and you can it'll open up just a little page to the right, and then you can see all the sessions that took place. Also, another way would be since you've given your storage account, you can just go directly to your storage account to fetch the memory dump as well.
Yeah, one thing I really like about this unit is, again, I was looking at the diagnostic tools page, and there's a lot of care being taken about being language aware, right? Programming language aware. So there's a little drop down which was defaulted to ASP.NET for us because that's what our website is based on. And I noticed that if we switch it to Java, then accordingly all the tools switch accordingly. So very nice. I mean, as a developer, I feel very good knowing that you've taken that into account. Every developer obviously has their own favorite tools, and they can easily get to it just by switching the development language on there. So that's well done.
Thank you.
Well, I was thinking through like the error codes or web apps being down. Is this the place where you would simulate like a load testing, or should you go to like Chaos Studio for those situations?
So for simulating load testing, I think you can definitely leverage the load testing service. And we do have integration with the load testing service, which I believe is in public preview at this moment. And basically within load testing, if there's been any issues detected, especially like on the availability and performance of the application, there will be a link provided in the load testing interface. You click on it and it'll take you directly to the page where you can see more detailed diagnostics information. But so to summarize my answer, you can't simulate load testing within App Service Diagnostics, but we do have integration with load testing service.
Awesome.
And I take that these features are all, there's no additional charge for them, right? They're all included in terms of the base price that you pay for the app service.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, this is mostly no configuration necessary except for these diagnostic tools where you would have to input and configure conditions and triggers you want to define. But apart from that, no configuration necessary, and you'll just see it right after you create your web app and come to the overview page. You'll just immediately see that menu item you can start exploring.
Now, what kind of process do you have in place to identify new scenarios that you may not have covered here, right? Like obviously, as you said, you've used some of your experience with CSS engineers and whatnot to create these scenarios that are covered in these tools. But let's suppose we hit a new scenario, right? Maybe I don't know, some kind of denial of service attack scenario, whatever. I don't know, I'm just making it up. Where you have to add on. So do you have is this something that's going to be an ongoing thing where you're going to add on new features to this tool, and how do you figure out what features you need to add?
Yeah, so we have various people looking into the case volume every day, and also like from the platform side, which errors are being hit most. So if we have that information, we can easily convert them into these checks and try to surface them to the customers. So yeah, we are always working on covering more scenarios.
He's trying to put me out of business, is what I heard, since I live on the broken side of things.
I was just thinking, I said the number of people calling in for support now is going to drop dramatically after this.
There's definitely some things in there that we used to do by hand for sure that are much easier and faster to do automated now. This is great to see.
Great to hear.
Any last questions for you?
No,
Or
this
you-
is like I said. I mean, this is awesome to see us pushing more and more of this stuff forward to customers because if they have problems, they don't want to talk to us either, right? They want to figure it out themselves and resolve it themselves. So this is great.
Are there plans to roll this out to other compute services as well, besides app service?
Great that you asked. So we actually have presence in many different Azure resources already. So you'll see a similar experience for AKS, API management, logic apps, function apps, and Signal R, and a few more that I can't name at the top of my head. But we are always expanding. So you most likely within the next months or years, you'll start seeing more of this experience for Azure services.
Wow,
Thank
that's
you very
awesome.
much.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope this was hopefully fun for you. This is
Thank
one
you
of
for
our
having me.
goals.
Yes.
And thanks everyone.
Thanks, folks. See y'all later.
Thank you.